Across the Wide and Lonesome Prairie, The Oregon Trail Diary of Hattie Campbell, 1847, by Christiana Gregory, published by Scholastic. April 12th, Monday. Pa says any day now. The grass will start greening and we must be ready to go. Some of the men are trying to pick leaders, but there are so many arguments about who will be boss and what the rules will be. Pa says we'll just move on out with Tall Joe, as he seems to be the most experienced. Our wagon is so handsome you wouldn't guess it used to be our old farm rig. Pa and Uncle Tim added 6 tall hoops to hold the canvas on top. It looks as plump and white as a fresh raised loaf of bread. Inside it's neatly packed but crowded. Our boxes of food, dishes, and pots are in back to make cooking quicker. Tools and furniture are in the front with our barrel of water. In the middle, between sacks of flour and beans, is a small nest where I can sit with the boys. 2 lanterns hang from the hoops, along with extra coils of rope, our canteens, tin pans, and tin cups. It is noisy as a tinker's cart. There's not one spare inch for anyone to stretch inside, so every night we must pitch tents. One for Ma and Pa, the other I'm to share with Benny and Jake. Ours fits like a lean-to alongside the wagon and is cozy and out of the wind. Still, I'm bothered to sleep outside for the next 6 months. What about snakes? What if Indians come in the middle of the night? April 14th, Wednesday. I have made a friend. She is 14, 1 year older than I am, with freckles over her nose and cheeks and beautiful green eyes. She is not as bossy as Becky. Matter of fact, she seems real shy, but I think I shall like her very much anyhow. When I told her I'm scared of Indians, she said, "Don't worry, Hattie, there are probably plenty more good Indians than bad." We've been walking to the edge of town together to watch the blacksmith repair tools and such. My friend's name is Pepper Lewis, and she has a twin brother named Wade. Camped near us is a lady who is so fat she can scarcely walk. She must weigh 300 pounds. Her arms are as thick as my waist. It is hard not to stare, especially on account of that husband of hers has no legs. Either she carries him around or he rides in a little cart she pulls. I hope they don't come over to visit with Ma, because I won't know what to say. April 22nd, Thursday, Alcove Spring. We are 3 days west of Independence, camped at Alcove Spring. Water gushes from a ledge down 10 feet into a pool where there are ferns and deep shade. How delicious the water tastes. Ma and I waited our turn with other women in the wagon train to fill our canteens and jugs. A tiny frog swam into my palm, then out again. All the while we were serenaded by crickets. My feet are sore and blistered, so much that it hurts to walk. It felt good to soak them in the cool pond. I'm going to go barefoot, but Mama says there are too many stickers and thorns. Soon enough the blisters will turn to calluses, she said. When we finally pulled out of Independence, leaving behind the Missouri River, and the sun wasn't up yet, 24 wagons were already ahead of us. Behind were hundreds of cows, horses, and sheep. I was so excited I yelled, "Hooray, hooray!" At long last we were on our way to Oregon. But oh, the dust! So much dust we could barely see the rumps of our own oxen. My eyes stung and we were all coughing. Pa steered to one side of the trail, but other families pulled alongside, making 4 abreast. I soon tired of the bumping and jolting and rattling and sitting in a cramped space, so I gathered my skirt about my knees and jumped to the ground. I ran between the wagons until I saw Pepper sitting up with her paw. I hollered to her. When she leapt down, her skirt flew up, showing off her leggings, white as cattails. We hurried away from the trail where it wasn't as noisy. We walked for 6 hours and talked the whole time. She said, "Hattie, when we get to Oregon, let's ask our fathers to build houses right next to each other." And I said, "Then we can share a garden. I'll plant the lettuce and corn, you plant the tomatoes." So as we walked along, Pepper and I planned out our whole future, down to the matching lace curtains we'd make for our bedrooms, the pet kittens we'd raise, and so on. My, how the dust leaves a gritty taste in our mouths. It's awful. With every step our hems pick up burrs from the tall grass. Dried brush scratches our ankles. Finally, that first day when the sun was directly overhead, everyone stopped. Pepper and I were so wore out we fell back into the shade of our wagon, laughing. Do we have to keep going? We asked Pa. He just smiled at us as he carried water to the animals. The first night camping was a late one with singing and dancing. Pepper and I swung in a circle with Jake and the little twins, round and round. We are on our way, was the cry, heard over and over. Even Ma joined in when folks started singing, Buffalo Gals. But when Pa asked her to do do-si-do, she lifted Benny onto her hip and turned from the wagon. Time for bed, she said. Maybe when Mama sees Oregon, she will dance. April 25th, Sunday. At 4 o'clock in the morning, when it is still pitch dark, the bugle sounds. That is when breakfast fires are started and men ride out to herd in the animals, but today there was a loud discussion. Some families want to rest because of the Sabbath for prayer and worship, but some, including Pa, says we must press on with no delays. Winter could come early and we need to be over the mountains by then. We must not make the same mistake as the Donners. No one says much about them, but I often think about the terrible, terrible business of eating dead friends. I'm brave, but not near brave enough to do that. So we must hurry along. October is 6 months away. Will it really take half a year to reach Oregon? I wonder. Finally, just before sunrise, the men agree to travel on Sundays, but families will take turn reading scriptures and giving a prayer at each meal. The prairie is wide and lonesome without a house or barn in sight. We caught up to several heavy freight wagons pulled by mules. Pa said we're on the Santa Fe Trail. In a few miles, the trail will split. The freighters will head southwest toward the territory of Mexico, and we shall continue northwest. With every mile, it feels like the sky and trail are moving with us, as if we're walking in place. Everything looks the same no matter how far we've come. Only when I look down at my dusty shoes and see that, yes, I am walking forward and the footprints behind are mine, can I actually believe we are moving. Girls are gathering dandelions in their aprons to make a salad, also young leaves from tumbleweed plants. Aunt June said to look for wild carrots and onions from seeds dropped by last summer's travelers. The little twins found sunflower stalks and pretended to ride them like ponies. They are such dear children. I shared some taffy with them at supper. April 27th, Tuesday. A few days ago we crossed the Kansas River. At first I was scared watching the horses wade in because the water splashed their heads, and I worried they wouldn't be able to breathe. But somehow they managed to swim, paddling like dogs, their necks stretched high and strong. Now we are at the Big Blue River, which is much wider and faster than the Kansas. The men are discussing how we should cross it and whether we should do so now before dark. Everyone is dead tired. Most families want to spend the night on this side because there's plenty of dry firewood and they want to rest. One lady yelled out, "We are wore out, mister. Can't you see that?" But tall Joe just stood high in a wagon seat and held up his arms for quiet. "We got to cross now," he shouted back. He said the river's low, but it could rise overnight, no telling. Another thing he said, "Come tomorrow morning, the animals will be so frisky they'll be harder to force into the water." I must help Ma wrap up the cheese and figs we ate at noon and change Benny's wet pants. Already 2 men are riding to the other side. Water's up to their saddles and the horses' tails are floating. Several boys on horseback are whooping and yelling as they ride across. Their rifles were taken away from them so they wouldn't shoot anybody by mistake. Hooray. April 2nd? Wednesday, I think. While crossing the Big Blue, Jake, Benny, and I sat in our little spot in the wagon. As we floated, I could feel the pull and jerk as the animals struggled to swim. We could see forward through a small space between boxes. There were many wagons ahead of us, their white tops swaying from the current. Suddenly, Pa jumped into the river to turn our oxen because they were trying to swim downstream. Ma grabbed the reins and wrapped them around her hands. When we began tipping over on our right side, I screamed, terrified we'd sink. Water poured in through the canvas. I could see that Ma's bonnet had fallen back over her shoulders and she was pulling the reins hard, trying to turn the animals. Everything in the wagon not tied down slid toward us. 2 sacks of beans rolled onto my legs and a bag of flour burst open when it fell against the rocker. While looking straight ahead, Ma yelled for us to lean with all our weight against the high wall. As we clung to an overhead hoop, one of the lanterns swung and hit my head so hard I wanted to let go, but I knew I must keep my arm around little Ben so he wouldn't get washed away. Pa kept swimming with the oxen, and with Ma's help we somehow tipped them back up. It seemed forever, but was probably just a minute. Benny was crying because he was scared and his clothes were wet. The three of us were covered with a gooey white paste from the spilled flour. It felt awful. My sleeves were sticky and my braid was stiff as a broom. Finally there was a thump as our wheels touched bottom. Then there was splashing as our team pulled us through the mud and onto the beach. More water rushed in, soaking our blankets, but we hung them over brush to dry while we waited on shore for the others. It might take 2 days to get everyone across. I hope we don't have to cross any more rivers. This afternoon my little friends, the twins, wandered off to pick berries, but now it's near sunset and they've not returned. Their parents are frantic and I'm worried sick. Tall Joe and Pa are leading a search party. I wanted to help too, but Ma said she needs me to watch Jake and Benny so she can go sit with the twins' mother to comfort her. Oh, those poor children. They're much too small to be lost. Next day. When the bugle sounded at 4 o'clock, I awoke with a sick feeling, remembering I had fallen asleep to the voices of worried adults. Some had taken torches beyond the corral of wagons to search the grass and river banks late into the night. When I crawled out from the quilt, Benny and Jake rolled sleepily into my warm space. "Mama?" I called. "I'm here, Hattie." Her voice came from her tent. "Have the little twins been found?" I whispered. Ma stepped out of the doorway. Dark circles were under her eyes and her braid was over her shoulder. "Not combed out since yesterday. No, dear, they ain't been found." Ma hurried us through breakfast of cold biscuits and jam. When Pa brought in the oxen and began harnessing them, I cried out, "We can't be leaving!" He and Ma looked at each other. "2 other families will stay behind to help the parent search, Hattie. We must keep going." "But why? Why can't we stay here and help too?" Pa came over and put his strong arms around me. "I'm sorry the children are lost, Hattie, but their Ma and Pa have insisted that everyone keep going. They understand we can't all stay. I'm sorry." As we pulled out, I watched the campsite. The mother was just a small shape until we rounded a bluff. Then I saw her no more. I pulled my brothers into my lap and started to sing them a song, but my heart was so heavy I burst out crying. Later. I taught Jake how to shake out his blanket, then roll it up with string. I must do Benny's because he just drags his in the dust. Ma is too tired to notice their dirty faces, so I washed them myself. Another day. Today we came to the Little Blue, but thank God we didn't have to cross it. Our wagons are so heavy the oxen strain to pull us up the trail. We'll follow the river into Nebraska. Every time we stop and the dust has settled, I look back to see if the little twins and their family have caught up. No one speaks of them, and I don't know why. This morning I made batter for pancakes. I went to the stream to fill my pitcher, but when I returned to camp, the batter was black with mosquitoes. I started to dump it into the dirt, but Aunt Jane put her hand on my arm. "Hattie," she said, "don't waste. Just stir 'em up good. The griddle's hot enough to cook 'em through, and no one's ever died from such." So we had mosquitoes for breakfast. Jake called them skeeter cakes, and he said they tasted just fine soaked in molasses, but to me they were like sand in my teeth. When we opened one of our sacks, we found the bacon to be green and crawling with maggots, 50 pounds of it. Ma was so furious she shouted at my father. "The butcher in Independence said it would last months, and look here," she said to Pa, wiping her fingers along the meat. "There ain't a lick of salt anywhere." Every day it seems there is a new disappointment for my poor mother. Jake thought it was all right by him if we cooked up some maggots, but Pa dragged the sack outside of camp and buried it. At least 3 other families were sold rotten meat also. 3 days later. I've lost track of days and dates, so from now on shall not worry about them. Aunt June has also lost track because she's been sick with dizziness. Uncle Tim drives while she lies in the wagon, the canvas sides rolled up from the bottom to let air in. Ma herself is tired and grouchy. She said the dust gives her a headache, something fierce. There's no sign of the little twins family. A lady by the name of Mrs. Kenker brought over a cup of soup last night, but Aunt June was too vomity to even taste it. Mrs. Kenker has gray hair wrapped on top of her head, and she has all her teeth. She smiled real pretty and asked, "How you be?" to everyone. She reminds me of my sweet old grandma. She and her husband are well liked, it seems. At night when the fiddler starts up, they lead out with a waltz or polka, depending on how slow or fast the music. Soon the married couples join, then the younger men with sweethearts. How lovely they're together, folks whisper about Mr. and Mrs. Kenker. But I know something folks don't. This morning before sunrise, as we were taking down our tent, Mrs. Kenker came to check on Aunt June, so sweet and gentle-like. She laid her hand on my aunt's forehead, then kissed her cheek. Then, just as smooth and quiet as you please, Mrs. Kenker reached into our cooking box and slipped one of Ma's silver spoons into her apron pocket. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. My mouth dropped open, but no words came out. What will Mama do if I tell her? Evening. When we reached the high grassland of Indian country, we saw a wide open prairie filled with wild flowers, yellow, blue, and red like patches on a quilt. Tall Joe says that some days ahead we'll meet up with emigrants coming down from Iowa and Wisconsin territory. There could be twice as many of us then, all heading west. Pa wonders if there will be enough grass for all our animals or enough firewood for our camps. I've decided to walk to Oregon on account of there is no comfortable way to ride. Our rocking chair broke when it fell out the back, and Ma insists on keeping it, even though Pa says it takes up more room broke. She is so cross with him she will not listen to reason, and I don't want to upset her even more by telling her about her stolen spoon. All day our wagon drove alongside the Anderson family with baby Eliza May and her tree sisters. Mama says I must stop calling them that. How their mother cleans Eliza May's and Cassie's diapers is an amazing sight. After breakfast she pins them with thorns to the canvas sides of the wagon. As they flap in the breeze they dry, and the sun bleaches them whiter than they were hours before. By noon there are more tack to each side, and just before we turn into a circle at sundown, the Anderson wagon looks like a creature with many tiny wings. Pepper and I and some other girls hunted for food near old campsites. She has such a pleasant way of giving orders that several younger girls tagged along, eager to look here or there and dig in the dirt with their fingers. Like this, Pepper? They asked, and she would pat them on their shoulders and say, Why, yes, that's perfect. Good work. After a couple of hours, we had found small red potatoes, some pearl onions, and rosemary. Next day. Our train has about 135 wagons, so at night we divide into groups, spread out over a couple miles. For the past week, we've had the same 23 wagons in our circle. The littlest children can play safe inside while mothers gather around the fire to cook or visit. We are all becoming well acquainted. This is how we pull into a circle. The tongue of our wagon rests near the inside rear wheel of Uncle Tim's, and his does the same with the wagon in front of him, and so forth. All the wagons together form a horseshoe with an opening about 20 feet wide, so folks can come and go. After the animals are unhitched, they are led out to pasture with the rest of the stock. Men take turns guarding, so in case of an Indian attack, they are ready to herd them into our corral and pull chains across for a gate. Thus far, we ain't seen any Indians, and I'm glad for that. Folks say they are dirty and vicious, but I don't know. Ma's more cheerful today, but Pa still avoids arguing with her. She's been caring for Aunt June, and this morning said the illness was on account of Aunt June is going to have a baby before we get to Oregon. 2 large kettles are on the fire tonight, one with beans and the other with vegetables and beef bones left over from last night's meal. Some families spread a cloth in the dirt to make it look nice, but us, Ma and Aunt June, are already sick of washing dishes, so sometimes we just take turns dipping cups in and sharing spoons, then it's not so much to clean. Mrs. Kenker uses white linen with china plates and 2 crystal wine goblets, for she and the mister tip back a few each night. I'm keeping an eye on her.